Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Report Podcast, episode 129. Benjamin Yoder here today, to talk to you about video games, and it is time. Cleanup season has begun. It's spring cleaning in November. It's my new holiday. As I mentioned last week and a couple weeks before that, I have a lot of video games that are kind of ongoing at the moment. So I decided, now that I've kind of had a bit more time to actually play some games, I decided I was going to start cleaning up some of my current list of games. So either I was going to make the decision of putting it off for now, making a effort to play it in the near future, and to go ahead and finish it up now. So one of the first things I did, actually right after I finished recording the podcast last week, was I was like, I'm going to finish the 24th District of Tokyo, or District 24, whatever it is, 24 Tokyo. And if you watched my pickups video from last week, I talk about it a little bit there. So 24 Tokyo, if you haven't heard of it, it's basically a Japanese only visual novel that's kind of like a detective focused thing. I picked it up. It was sold at it was like a Doujin game, so I bought it off DL site a while ago, and it's fine. But the problem is that it's pretty dense in its kanji as far as I can tell, and I have very little Japanese knowledge. So I with games like First Kiss Story, I was able to kind of figure it out because there's voice acting, and with like Scum of the Brave, there's a lot of animation. So even though there's not a lot of voice acting, there's a lot of information to tell you what's going on at a time. 24 Tokyo has a ton of art and a ton of unique art, but it's very difficult to follow what's happening. But I got probably about like 2/3 through the game the first time I started playing. Then I kind of put it down for a while because I was kind of losing interest, and I basically decided that I was just gonna set it to auto and play through the rest of the game that way. Quote play, just basically watch the screen, stop trying to dissect the text, and just let it go. So I was able to wrap it up pretty quickly, and man, the ending of that game gets real weird. Like the main game itself, pretty straightforward detective story. It definitely, it has an anime aesthetic, and so storytelling and character-wise, there's definitely some level of that like kind of lightheartedness to it. There is. The main character, Akane, is a very much appears as like a young high school girl or something like that, even though she's kind of supposed to be like this hard-boiled detective, and they definitely play into that a bit. So to see the game go from like this very straightforward story about 3D printed guns that were used in a murder case to this insane series of events that I don't want to spoil, but I did post the ending to my Twitter feed. If you want to go look that up, just start looking for my 24 Tokyo thing. I'll link the video to it actually in the description here if you really want to see it. But man, that was a weird way for the first episode of that series to end. So I'm glad I finished it. So it kind of ends on as somebody who can't read it, seems like a fairly unsatisfying note where it's just kind of like you solve the current mystery kind of, but it seems like it kind of falls in your lap for the most part. There's like a person that's like, oh, very clearly set up as like the evil person from the beginning, and then you just kind of find out at the end, like even though the characters are kind of unsure if they're evil or not, that oh yeah, she's actually evil, and then you just end up basically shooting her at the end, and then she's dead, and that's kind of it. So it's pretty straightforward in that regard. There was an episode 2 and 3 that seemed to have come out. I have pretty strong confidence of that, because even though it's not available online to buy digitally, and I haven't been able to find any evidence like that a physical version exists online, I did find a blog post by the development team, Studio Busk, that had mentioned that episode 2 and episode 3 were sold together in a Comiket release, and specifically there was a save file bug that was causing your save file to not save properly. So they were basically like, hey, email us if you have problems, and we'll try to fix your save file issue. So, and I there is another website that does show a box art for episode 2 and 3. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of resources online to buy physical Doujin games reliably, and I've had very little luck finding anything online. So I have purchased the Comiket preview edition of the game, which I did kind of skip through that real quick. It's the full first episode as far as I can tell, but there are actually some changes. There's only one particular change I noticed about the very end of the episode, but I'm gonna guess there's probably a lot of text changes and things like that too. I kind of want to archive it on archive.org, but it's also the entirety of the first episode, and it's that's what they're selling on DL site. And even though, as far as I can tell, Studio Busk doesn't like really get money anymore, or well, they're not really in existence anymore, you still can buy the game on DL site. So it is available, the original game. It's just not that version of the game. So I feel a little weird about uploading it at this time, but I might go ahead and just try to back it up for now, and then, be prepared to upload it at some point. But I don't know if DL site has like a cutoff date of when somebody stops receiving money for a game, or if it just always will be there or something. I don't know. I mean, a ton of people probably aren't buying it off DL site, but I don't really, I don't know. It's at the point where you could still get some monetary value for that game, and I don't know how I feel about uploading, even if it's unfinished, but the entire first episode of it. But there's only 100 copies of it too, so I want it to be preserved at the same time. So I don't know. We'll see. 24 Tokyo, it's kind of weird. I didn't really love it, but if I find episode 2 and 3 for sale, I'm going to buy it. So I might try to see what kind of I don't really know what the physical Doujin game scene looks like when you go to Japan and go to a Doujin store, because I imagine the physical booklets are around and you can find those. It might be hard to find a specific one, but I'm gonna guess you can go to stores and buy from sections and categories and things like that. But I don't know what physical Doujin games look like in those stores, if it's a very minor part of it or if it's a large section or something like that. So I'll definitely be looking for that while I'm in Japan. In only a month. It's getting pretty dang close. So yeah. The other thing I've been playing is I kind of just finished wrapping up Amiibo Festival. There's no real end state for Amiibo Festival, so I basically considered it to be, I played through every month of the game. I bought I filled out my town. You can't buy all the attractions that you can put in your town, but there's a certain number of slots you have, and so I filled out all those slots in my town. And then I also capped out one amiibo, Tom Nook, and I was like, that's probably good. That probably good part of it still took me 25 hours to get there, actually. I looked up the my play time. I was like, that's a lot of time to play Amiibo Festival, which, I don't super love. But I have a quick play coming up for Amiibo Festival this week, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts on Amiibo Festival, you can check that out. It's a little longer than I was hoping it'd be. It's 50 minutes long. I was hoping to be closer to 40, but that's the nature of that game, unfortunately, for better or for worse. So yeah, and that's kind of all I've done in terms of game playing this week. So not a ton of stuff, but I plan to try to finish up We Play Motion here. I might actually start trying to do that this weekend and finish that up, because I'm pretty far along in that. I just need to invest some more time. And also, fun little thing, I probably should have mentioned this at the start of the podcast. I actually bought speaking of Doujin stuff, I guess, a Final Fantasy 11 mug. So I'll also include a picture of that, because it has little snipper crabs from Final Fantasy 11, which, if you don't know, Final Fantasy 11 has a pretty distinct looking crab. I don't know if they are based off a previous Final Fantasy crab enemy, but they're pretty distinct looking, and I think they're in Final Fantasy 14 as well. Although I think there's 2 different types of crabs. I think the snipper crabs are pretty early on, but then I think in the Ul'dah region is where the snipper crabs are. So that's pretty cute. And I also got a pencil carrying case. So I'll put a photo of that in the description as well if you want to take a look at that. And that's kind of it for me this week. In terms of news story, I don't have a ton of particularly deep news stories here, but I think there's some interesting things here. Mighty Number 9 looks like it's being delisted in Japan, which is unfortunate. I know most people are going to sit there and laugh about that game being delisted and say it's yet another mark on that game's reputation or something, or that it deserves to be delisted. I don't know. But I like Mighty Number 9 a lot. If you don't know, if you haven't watched before, and I'll put a link in the description and at the end of the YouTube video of this podcast, I did a Mighty Number 9 review, and I really love that game. I think that game is great. It's my favorite Mega Man style game ever made, and I know it has its problems, but I think a lot of what that game does is really beneficial to that style, or that I guess you could say the Mega Man series, in my opinion. I think it really creates something that feels pretty distinct, and I'm really sad we'll never see any kind of follow up on that. But yeah, so I'm gonna guess maybe Spike. So it doesn't look like the U.S. version's being taken down, but it's a different publisher for the U.S. version. The Japanese release is being published by Spike, or was published by Spike Chunsoft. So I wonder if they just had like a time-specific publishing deal with them, and it wasn't like something that they would be forever able to sell. And so, once that deal has expired, they basically are going to go ahead and, remove it because, they don't have the right to sell it anymore, essentially. So I'm hoping that, the US version stays online. I may go out of my way to try to get a physical copy of Mighty Number 9 for the PS4. I do have it digitally on PC, and I have the physical Wii U copy, but the Wii U physical copy is not the version you want. Like it works, but it's not the one you want to play. So I may see if there's like a cheap version of the PS4 one out there. And I might go ahead and buy the DLC, because I hadn't purchased the DLC yet for the game. And at least with the Spike Chunsoft version, or Japanese version, being delisted, they're delisting the DLC as well. So I think I might have the Wii U DLC. I'm not sure. I might have to see, but I mean, that's not how I want to play that DLC. That version of the game is not great. It's kind of a mess. So yeah, but I'm sad to see that it's going. I know most people won't feel that way, but I do. The other or I don't know if it's really interesting, but I think it's a good sign of things is, I think there was like a Inside Xbox event that was this week, and they announced a handful of Japanese games that are coming to the Xbox One, which I think is very important. A lot of these are they're all ports at this point. The first one is maybe expected because Kingdom Hearts 3 is on Xbox One. The Kingdom Hearts 1.5 plus 2.5 collection is getting ported to Xbox One, which I think is important, given that, Kingdom Hearts 3 is on the platform. You might as well, give people a way to play that. And given that, Microsoft's focusing on backwards compatibility, I think that's important, because going forward, even into the next console, these games will be playable, and you will want the entire Kingdom Hearts library available there if you're going to have Kingdom Hearts 3 at the very least. And then there's also the Yakuza games are getting ported. So Yakuza, well, some of them at least so far, Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2 are all getting Xbox One ports, which I think is super important, given that Yakuza has become a pretty influential franchise in the West at this point. And if you want to show support for Japanese console, I think Yakuza is a big one, in the same way that you need like a lot of Square Enix IPs on your system. Like Square Enix and Sega are two publishers that you're going to want to work with long term, I feel like, for Japanese games. And it's getting them late, and it's not gonna, this stuff isn't gonna mean a lot of things to most people, but I think what it does show is more long-term support for Japanese developers, having these games come over, Phantasy Star Online 2 coming over, and being on the Microsoft stage, stuff like that. This is the kind of stuff I want to see from Microsoft right now, because I'm not married to the PlayStation. Like, I'm not a fan of Sony's first-party content. It's not really for me. I don't think it's bad. I just don't like it that much either. And I'm not gonna sit there and say I like Xbox One's first-party content that much either. It's not really that important to me. But I always want more platforms and more choices. And I will say, like, when it comes to backwards compatibility this last generation, Xbox One seemed to be the platform to be at. And backwards compatibility is important to me, and getting to play original Xbox games running in 4K, that's pretty awesome. And getting to play, the rare library running at higher resolutions, like to the point that they're like, hey, we're going to port Grad by the Ghoulies or whatever it is. That's great. I'm glad they put that stuff out on that platform. And if Microsoft continues, ramping up that backwards compatibility lineup and bringing in Japanese developers, I think that could really, really benefit them. And I think up until this point, you could definitely say, hey, they're not going to get like a Mega Labyrinth and stuff like that, though. Those smaller Japanese titles that aren't a huge deal. But we are kind of seeing a shakeup in that Japanese space a little bit for, I think, a variety of reasons. One is content control from Sony right now. If you're making a game like Mega Labyrinth, which is, focused around like breast expansion as a part of its mechanics, Sony's, forcing you to change the content on that platform. And so you have things like Gun Gun Pixies coming out only on Nintendo Switch, and I assume Panty Party and stuff like that. Like, the Nintendo Switch has in some ways become the new PlayStation Vita, from both a functional standpoint, and also it's just like a place for those developers to go. You have like, what's that game? Or not that series. It's like an anime tank series. Dang it. Is it Girls on Panzer or something like that? I think that's exclusive to the Switch. Maybe it's on PS4 as well, actually. I can't quite recall that one. But you are seeing some more titles that are only coming out for Switch, because, Sony doesn't want them there, essentially. So you do have a little bit of this disruption happening, and I think naturally those publishers are probably going to more go to the Switch, because that is a successful platform in the region, and the Xbox is not going to be that so much. But it does give them an opportunity, because, Sony is kind of, trying to shovel off some of these developers, or at least, if not shovel them off, force them into making particular types of content that may not necessarily line up to what they're trying to do. And Nintendo's been a safe haven for that stuff, at least when it comes to third party. First party, not so much, obviously, with something like, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, still, if anything, the censorship has been expanded to another region. Or if you don't want to call it censorship, the changes to make it more, I don't know what wording you'd want to use, like, if you had the perception that it's being exploitive of females or something like that, to make it less of that perception kind of thing. So I do think it opens up an opportunity, and I don't think Microsoft will be the one to get like, Omega Labyrinth so much, but it does bring them into the possibility that like more smaller Japanese developers might be more willing to work with them. Inti-Creates published like Gunvolt, I think, on Xbox One, which is great to see as well. So I'm really hoping that they continue to push, this push to get more Japanese games on the platform. And, I sometimes hear people say like, well, they tried it on Xbox 360 and looked how that worked out. Like it didn't meet their expectations. And I could definitely see that. But I think the key thing with the Xbox 360 is that Japanese games were becoming more and more like not mainstream at that time. Like there's a good while in the late 360 area, like mid to late 360 area, where Japanese games just straight up didn't matter to most people. And I don't like, I think many of us who continue to play Japanese games at that time would not agree that the quality or anything like that was a big deal. But when it comes to, the market viability of those games, ever since like 2015, when, around the time like Nier and Yakuza 0 were really, picking up steam, it has that market has improved significantly for Japanese games, and so I think it is worth doing another attempt at it. And then you also have Microsoft's whole digital push with Game Pass and stuff like that, so they have a really compelling option right now. I feel like that it could be interesting. I don't really know how Japan feels about digital games so much. It definitely wasn't as big of a thing. I don't know what the current market looks like in terms of digital only. I could definitely see like the appeal of not having to have physical games so much because of the space limitations while you're out there. But I think a lot of people will buy and resell games there. But I'm speaking totally as somebody who doesn't know anything about the Japanese region outside of some things I've heard over the years. But I think that I really hope that Microsoft really makes a push for it again, and I hope they're successful, because I think that there needs to be more platforms, especially if Sony's going to be start mandating certain things for some publishers. I think it's important that there are other places for some play companies like D3 to go if they want to make their Onechambara sexy bikini zombie slayer game kind of thing. And Nintendo is a safe place for that right now, but as we've seen in the past with Nintendo, they can be kind of back and forth on that stuff. There's a while where they're like, hey, we want your Mad Worlds, we want your Grinder or whatever that game was called from the Conduit developers. We want your bloody M-rated games, but at the same time, they also were like blocking Binding of Isaac from coming out on 3DS for a while. So it's just like, yeah, I would feel more comfortable the more places people can put stuff out. Obviously, PC is probably the most like, free place you can put stuff out. But in terms of like, physical copies, and people who are buying those types of games care a lot about physical copies. I don't know why that's the case, but that's just kind of the overlap, I think. And so I'm really hopeful that the PC market will eventually, start getting more and more physical copies. And I think with like Kickstarter games, you do see that happen very often where the PC version will get like a physical copy, but I don't think you're seeing it with standard releases very often. Although you're seeing more and more on console sides where standard releases come out that are cases, but they're literally just like a cardboard, or a paper slip inside of a case that says, please download the game through this code. Thank you, kind of thing. And yeah, that whole thing. So yeah, I'm super hopeful. I'm hoping, we have a really great race next generation where everybody's kind of in line so we can prevent situations where you have, Sony this generation and Microsoft last generation sitting there being like, we're not going to do cross-platform play because we're on top and we don't have to do it. And then, we're now there, but, it was a nightmare getting Sony to come off their pedestal for that. And, that's not to say something specific about Sony, because Microsoft, I'm pretty sure, around that time was also like back there in 360 era was like, no, we're not going to do any cross-platform play. When I think Sony was like, yeah, we'll definitely do it because the underling console is always the one that wants to do that kind of stuff to improve their situation. So yeah. Also, Final Fantasy 14 is coming to Xbox One, which I think is really, really important. Because that is such a massive MMO. It's crazy that in my opinion, it's crazy it hasn't been on Xbox One since at least like Heaven's Word. Like I would think even with like a Realm Reborn, I think it would be important for it to be on there. But we're like 4 or 5 expansions at this point, and now it's coming out. It's kind of crazy. So I don't know, but I'm glad it's finally getting there. I'm glad Microsoft is making those pushes, and yeah, hopefully we have a great next console generation. I'm looking forward to it. I think I was listening to Giant Bomb podcast, and they were like speculating on when these consoles get revealed, and they mentioned the PS4 was revealed in February the year it came out. So I'm like, well, we're getting pretty dang close, to that. So we might start hearing about next consoles sooner than I guess I feel like I felt like we would, because end of next year is looking likely. So yeah, that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. In terms of content up on the website, like I said, Amiibo Festival Quick Play will come out this week on Wednesday, so look forward to that. And then last week I put out a gaming pickups video where I talk about some Dreamcast games, Wii games, Gun Pixies I talk about on there. So if you want to hear some thoughts on some games I recently picked up and put a little bit of time into, check that out. And then like I said earlier, I'll link the Mighty Number 9 review video at the end of this stream. Or this video, or put it in the description as well if you want to check it out, because Mighty Number 9, cool game, pick it up. Hopefully it doesn't get delisted. And then I also had a Dreamcast stream that went up where I basically streamed a bunch of Dreamcast games because I got a VGA box that can output 480p. So that's up on the website as well. And so going forward though, in terms of stream stuff, well, not really going forward, but the next stream game is going to be Martian Gothic, which if you're not familiar, is a PlayStation 1 survival horror game set on the Mars space station. Although it takes place in June 2019, which I'm like, oh great. It's like EDF where that game took place this year. It's like, oh, the far-flung future of 20 years from now, and then it's like, yeah, we're still not on Mars, boy. We also haven't been invaded by giant ants yet. So yeah. So that's going to be the next stream game. It's about 6 hours long, so I expect it to be about 3 to 4 streams long. And then, around that time, I'll be going to Japan. So if we have another stream after Martian Gothic before I go to Japan, we'll probably do something short. And then once we come back from Japan, I'll let you know what the plan is from there. Still working on getting the content done for when I'm out in Japan at the moment. So that is still occupying the majority of my time rather than actual content, which I'm sorry. But I think it would be important not to have a 2-week dead period while I'm out in Japan. It's also during the holiday time, so I'm creating a little bit extra. So if you have a lot of free time, hopefully some of the extra content I'm doing, fits. Or fits in your schedule, and you want to do some stuff. I know I have at least one thing coming out on Christmas Eve, and I'm having 2 replacement stream videos, and then I also have the New Year's post going up as well, and that's a lengthy post. So hopefully you have time to read it. It's longer than I thought it'd be, but yeah, it was fun. Anyways, thanks for coming. OneControlReport.com is the website, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.